This is the way it translated in my mind. If I'm powerful enough to create in my body all of these rare diseases, what would happen if I took that same power and created this life of my dreams? Mm-hmm. And it felt, I saw it as power rather than weakness. And so from a complete negativity victim person that I was, that was really different for me to have that thought. But I believe that little mind change, that little switch started the healing in my body. And within 3 months, I was off of all meds, with the help of my physicians, all of them.
If you deal with your trauma, but you're still treating your body like trash and eating junk and whatever else, like that's not going to be good either, really.
Right.
Versus, I'm like doing all the right health things, but you're not dealing with stuff. Your body's not going to integrate those healthy things well either.
Like it's
right?
both. It's basically both.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's holistic. You have the power already within you if you'll just harness it.
Two people are in a field of clovers. Both of them are looking for four-leaf clovers. One of them believes they will find four-leaf clovers and the other one does not. Which one is going to find four-leaf clovers? Kent and Heather McKean share information in this podcast conversation on how to heal from trauma and optimize your life. I want to warn you, this is a different way of looking at issues like mental health than you may be used to. It's such a radically different perspective that if you've struggled with mental health issues or long-term physical health issues, this might stir some things up for you. It might make you angry or even want to turn off this episode. So I want to give a warning for anyone who's not in the heart space to receive this type of information. And I'm so sorry for what you're struggling through, and it's not your fault. If I heard this information years before I was ready, I might have felt triggered too. I might have internalized their message and made it personal. But I came across this information at a time when my heart was extremely open, and I personally experienced mind change in a way that has transformed my life in more ways than one. What's incredible is that two people can have the same experience and view that experience in completely different ways. That's the power of the mind. There's a reason scientific studies includes a placebo group, partly to take into account the participants' perception, also known as the placebo effect. It's because the mind can be very influential in the outcome. I'm generally a very positive person, but there have been situations where I found myself spiraling mentally over something that happened in my life and letting that thing that happened take over my life, to where I missed out on being present. I turned into someone I didn't want to be. Angry, hyper-emotional, easily pissed off, and distracted. All because of my mind. No one could help me out of it until I was ready to be helped, until I was ready to help myself. Until I became a victor, not a victim, and healed from my trauma. If you want to heal from your past, ranging from small experiences that stuck with you all the way to abuse and neglect and loss, you have to face your heartache and trauma head on to change your mind. Shoving your pain down deep inside of you, pretending it's not there, neglecting your inner child who wants to heal, does not heal you. Your subconscious is so powerful. You can do all the positive affirmations you want, but if you don't address your subconscious, you might go to a place where you don't even recognize yourself anymore and act and think in ways that your true highest self wouldn't. Every one of you is worthy of healing and living a life full of joy and confidence and living the life you desire. Love is the strongest medicine. Show yourself love, which in turn ripples out to others, because you are already enough. Please keep in mind, I'm aware of how controversial these perspectives and following stories are. We are not unaware of the typical view of mental and physical health. This is a radically different way of understanding the mind and how it works in the body. Your health is all-encompassing, and the mind and body are inseparable. And it's crucial that you understand going into this that this is not your fault. Rather, this message is meant to empower you. If after listening to this episode, you are pumped and your heart is open to this concept, check out Heather and Kent McKean's Mind Change course, which will give you the tools to tap into your subconscious and change your mind, which will then change your life. I will link in the description box below for you guys, and I also got a discount for you as well. Use my code Ellen50 for $50 off the course. Now let's get into this episode. I hope you enjoy it. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. When I was envisioning the podcast and figuring out my first definitely 15, 10, 20 episodes, you guys were definitely on my list. I really want to talk about this, and it's such an important topic. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
For people who don't know, when we bought our first house in Paia, we were getting settled in, and just a few weeks later, the McKeans bought a house right next door, and that is where our friendship story begins. And we've had so many amazing experiences together, including mind change stuff, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
So for those who are like, what the heck is mind change? Can you just explain, like, before we get into your guys' stories, like, what is mind change?
It's a great question. I would say if I had to give my little elevator speech, which again, we're not haven't nailed down, it's basically a way to reprogram our minds using neuroplasticity. So we're able to get in and reprogram and retrain and rewire our brains, which then affects our body. And I mean, that's the basis of it. It's got a lot of different...
We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But I would say that's the basic way of describing it.
Okay, cool. Anything you want to add to that, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, it's neuroscience-based therapy that really reprograms, reconstructs the neural pathways in our brain so that we no longer... I mean, we're 95 to 99% of our behaviors are subconscious. And so if you reprogram your subconscious, then not only do you feel different, but you act different without even thinking about it. And so, yeah, it's a really incredible tool that I'm proud of my wife for creating.
I feel like that's super important to consider the subconscious. Most of us don't even think about the subconscious because obviously it's subconscious,
Right.
but we don't give any kind of weight to like the power behind any changing even the subconscious, right? I feel like so much we're kind of thinking you can't even change your mind. That's kind of the thing. Like it's kind of considered, what's the word? Oh gosh, you really think law of attraction, all that type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's so much more important than that.
Well, science even said up until 20 years ago that by the time we're 20 years old, 30 years old generously, we're hardwired. There's no change after that. Science used to say that.
That our brains were static.
Wow.
And not changeable.
I didn't know that.
So that's where in the last 20 years with brain imaging technology, they've been able to see things light up. I mean, they're getting in there like, whoa, this is not what we thought it was. And that's the beauty of, and if I could just start it out by saying the beauty of what we've created and what we do is that it's coming from the personal experience, which I'll share, but also it's not a reductionist kind of focus. We've learned so much from reductionist thinking in one sense, focusing on the brain. People who've spent their entire lives focusing on the brain, or people who've spent their entire lives focusing on the body. But they have not been able to yet connect the two. And really, that would be a whole line of new learning for them, new focus. So people like us come along, and we're able to take all this beautiful, wonderful information and apply it to us as a whole being, which is what we are, and we can't really do anything, especially healing, outside of the wholeness that we are. So that's where we can take the new neuroscience and apply it to what we already know from physiology, psychology, but also spirituality. If we can step back and go, what's the good? What have they all learned? And put it all together, that's mind change.
And would you say that like we have more control to like the outcome of our lives than we realize? Is that a good way to explain it as well?
If we choose, and
Right.
that's the power that we have. We either, and we may talk about this, but we either give our power away constantly, or we allow the power to be from within, and we do everything. Everything comes from within. So we're either giving it away, here you go, or we actually are living from within. And that's a huge part of being authentic, which I'll talk about my inauthenticity.
Yeah,
But,
so how about you guys share then, like, what are your mind change stories? And
yeah,
where did you come
start?
from?
'Cause
Yeah.
That's really, this all started with you.
Okay, so I used to kind of have this trauma story, right? That I had come from a difficult background. There was physical abuse, neglect, my parents, drugs and alcohol and all of that stuff. So that was kind of my story. And I would speak about it and use that as a platform to, encourage people, because look at how strong I am, how well adjusted I am, that I didn't end up an addict or, all these different things.
Yeah.
So I thought, because I could speak about it without, breaking down or feeling a lot about it, that I was good, even with that kind of a history. And I would say that's a preferable way, at least for me. It was preferable to do that than to go down the, addiction route or various different things. But trauma doesn't just go away. It has to be processed out of the body. And if it's not, it gets stored and it comes out somehow. So for me, the way that it came out was physical illness. So in 2012, I started the end of the story. I'm at home on an IV drip, liver and kidney failure, really near death. We were having conversations about like making plans for what was going to happen if he was going to be a single dad. And I mean, we were having to have those real conversations. And I had gotten to that point by being diagnosed with disease after disease after disease. I mean, it's silly to think about. And even then, even in the midst of it, I was like, how can one person have so many serious, incurable, rare diseases?
What did you have? What were you like diagnosed with?
So it kind of started, I wouldn't say I was a healthy child, but I also didn't feel like I was sickly. So only when I look back that I'm like, oh, the reoccurrent tonsillitis, or I had a lot of different gut issues and, different stuff like that. But when I got pregnant, I had infertility, endometriosis, I bled 9 months, threw up every morning for about 9 months. That led to an endometriosis diagnosis, 2 surgeries. That led to a celiac disease diagnosis, then chronic fatigue syndrome, then fibromyalgia.
IBS, everything else out
and
there.
then all the stuff around the gut health stuff. So yeah, IBS, all of that. Then it became thyroid issues. So then it was hyperthyroid, hypothyroid. Then it was Graves' disease and Hashimoto's, which you can't have. You can't have both. They're opposite of one another. But I got both diagnoses. I got a goiter. It was like a whole thing.
Wow.
Then I'd say probably the biggest diagnosis that was like my rabbit hole was Lyme disease. And when I got diagnosed with Lyme disease, it just went into this spiral. Then I was diagnosed with POTS, which is a heart condition, really, and
incurable.
It's supposed to be incurable. And then I was in an infectious disease doctor, and I had some rare form of malaria that you can only get in Africa.
What?
But I'd never been to Africa. And all this stuff was showing up in blood tests and was like there. One of the other really big things is I had a lot of problems with my neck and back. And so I'd seen neurologists, I'd had surgeries. I was told I had the spine, this was when I'm in my 20s, the spine of a 70-year-old. And that I would probably, if I kept living the life that I was living, end up paralyzed. Because everything was bone on bone, and my spine, they called it degenerative disc disease. So he was like, your discs are just crumbling.
Wow.
So you're not gonna, and I do have 2 discs fused before I started this whole journey. And he said I'd end up with a completely fused, at least cervical spine, and possibly, moving down, because I had a lot of stuff with my low back.
Like you said, that was inevitable?
Inevitable.
And that, even after the surgery, the doctor said this is because of the fuse of these 2, you're only going to be able to move this much, which was true for 4 years until this work. And so obviously now
I couldn't turn my
you can
head.
Turn your head, you can do whatever.
I would turn like this.
I can't turn.
I couldn't turn. I thought I couldn't turn. And I thought that it was all, this physical stuff. So after that Lyme disease diagnosis, oh my heavens, that started. Then about 6 months into that, I found myself on 180 medications a day.
No.
I know. I have pictures. No one would believe it. I have lists and stuff, but this tells you why I went into liver and kidney failure.
Wow.
Like nobody can do that.
It was shots. It was pills.
Shots, pills, tinctures. I was on
whatever.
4 shots a day for rheumatoid arthritis. I got diagnosed with this arthritis. I was on 2 shots for that, which are immunosuppressive. I was taking all of these heavy duty medicines that were like side effects, hearing loss, eyesight loss, heart issues, like all of this stuff, death. Death. It was like you could just die, So it didn't say that, but it was like, all these different things that could happen. So that's where I feel like my body just started shutting down physically. And it wasn't until I had a couple of friends and people in my life that said, do you think your past has anything to do with this? And I was like, no, I have no issues with my past. Like, I can talk about it. I don't crying in my Wheaties because of my past. This was my idea about it. of like, it doesn't bother me.
So you really had this identity of like, I'm not affected by my past, and
Totally.
I don't need sympathy, I don't need empathy, I don't need to.
No.
I'm over it.
I'm
like
over
it's
it.
done. It's gone.
And even worse, it sounded good then, but even worse, I know now, is that it made me stronger. It made me who I am. My past is as if it took being physically, sexually abused for me to be this strong woman.
Right.
To be, like, I didn't even realize it, how messed up I was in my head about that.
I do sometimes hear that, and I think that does add value. Sometimes though, when people are like, that my past made me who I am today, I am stronger because of it. Like sometimes that story does make sense to me, but does that not make sense to you?
It used to, and I get it. But it's like, but if we go deeper, if we scratch the surface of that.
I'll add to that. Our past does make us who we are today, but it's how we represent our past. And so if we represent our past from the trauma and all the issues and whatever, and that's our representation of our past making us who we are today, then the only thing we're going to be today and tomorrow is something stemming from trauma. But if we use our past, and we can still be, from our past, but we're going forward from a different perspective, from a different place, from a healed place.
Right.
Then you go today and tomorrow from a healed place from your past. So there's a different way of looking at it.
Right. So is that kind of like Tony Robbins, you know him?
Yeah.
Like he kind of talks about that, and his story is really beautiful and amazing. Do you feel like that's the way of like the latter of what you said, like coming from a healed version? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that's huge, right? Because you can look at a trauma and say, well, because of that bad thing, I'm gonna be a different way, or because of this, and I've made peace with it, I'm healed from it. That's not who I am anymore, but I've learned this, and you're kind of coming from a higher perspective,
Right.
So I think that's
Right.
part of it.
Whereas maybe you were going like, I had this and I don't even need to deal with it. Like I've completely. It's not even something that you have to touch.
There's a difference between reaction and response. So a lot of people from their trauma react and live a certain way, versus if you're dealing with it and you're healed from it, you can respond in a different way.
That's so interesting.
Especially in our culture right now, I'm mindful of, we've got a lot of stuff about victim shaming. We do this, though. We swing the pendulum. We go from don't talk about your stuff, don't be a baby, suck it up and move on, to this other side, which is this kind of like, well, this is, I wouldn't be who I am today without all this stuff that happened. It's the only way I can relate to people. Like, my story makes me have value. That's what I take issue with.
Okay.
I would argue you were already valuable. It didn't take someone sexually molesting you for you to be valuable.
Yes, I see what you're saying. In the way you're
No.
explaining it, for sure.
Yeah, but and I know that we can make sense of it in our languaging and in our conscious mind, but the problem is the subconscious mind doesn't make sense of it that way. It links. So for me, that was keeping me sick, and I didn't realize it. And I had a lot of infertility issues, couldn't get pregnant. And of course, then you blame the endometriosis or whatever, and it all makes sense. But what I know now is, from an evolutionary perspective, we are carrying generational trauma down, and it has not been addressed for so many generations. And it isn't doing well for us as a species to not have dealt with this stuff.
Because it's exponentially building upon itself.
Yes. So epigenetics is the study that tells us that trauma can be passed down in our genes. And the Holocaust, they've done a lot of study on Holocaust survivors, second generation Holocaust survivors, showing up in their DNA stuff like malnutrition, a lot of PTSD issues, mental health issues. These are not the people that went through the Holocaust. These are their children and their grandchildren. So I say all that to say there's this idea that, if our trauma makes us and everything, we need to be dealing with this stuff, and we haven't been given the tools, I think, to do so.
Right. And is some of that, maybe it's a little bit genetics, and maybe it's also when the parents aren't dealing with their trauma, they're reacting in the way that they end up parenting and exuding and showing their life as an example. It impacts the children as well.
100%.
Yeah.
So that whole nature versus nurture debate is still, it's
both.
It's both, yeah.
It's always going to be both.
And in a moment, you'll hear like a little bit about her childhood. You'll hear my childhood, and then you'll see that, it actually doesn't matter.
Right.
It's both.
Yes. So I bring that up to say I really do believe now that my body was saying, like, don't bring children into this world when you've got all this stuff you're going to pass down. I didn't have the tools to deal with it. And I was carrying a lot of stuff. Stuff I wasn't really remembering even and not completely in touch with. So I think my body protecting me was like, do you really want to do this? I didn't have a great relationship with my mother, with my family. So I did all this infertility stuff. I was on a lot of shots and did a lot of stuff, finally got pregnant. But it was when I got pregnant and then had my children that my body was just like, no. And that started that cascade of all these illnesses and diseases. And I really believe it was this, I didn't know it at the time. This was a subconscious thing. I didn't think I could raise kids healthy. I didn't have any healthy examples. I didn't think I could do it. And I didn't want to pass down what I did have.
So emotionally healthy.
Yeah. Or physically too. Like there were so many things that I just realized. And I thought I had a narrative. I was broken. Of course, with my past, I'm going to end up like this. And, all these different things. So that was...
Metaphorically, you felt broken. And then physically, she was. I mean, I remember when our kids were little, before all of this, it was like, no, be careful with mom. Don't jump on mom. Don't do that. It was a constant, be careful because mom is frail. Right. And she was legitimately, but it wasn't just physical stuff.
It was a physical fragility that was manifesting from an emotional fragility. Yeah. But you could not have told me I was emotionally fragile.
No.
I'd have socked you probably. So no, I was not emotionally fragile. I was emotionally strong. But what that really meant was I felt all of two emotions, anger and fine. That was me being emotionally strong. So if you got in my way, I would get really angry. And I could protect myself that way, and I could do okay. And those were my range of emotions. And I think that motherhood, parenthood, calls us into that deeper place. Like, I've got to be able to feel a range of emotions if I'm going to have a child. Or they're going to learn how to not emote and feel like that's not okay.
Right.
And I would never have known that at the time. So that's where I think my body just spiraled down. And then I'm home on an IV drip. And a doctor comes to my house. And because they were coming to see me at my house at that point because I couldn't really get out. I mean, I was going in for IV infusions twice a week, but at this point I was so sick I could barely leave my house. So he says to me, have you heard of tapping? And I said, no, I haven't heard of tapping, but I'm willing to try anything, which he knows. I mean, I've tried so many things, so he knows that I'm open to anything. So he said, well, I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard that some people have success with it. I was like, okay, I will look this up. So I just Google tapping, and it takes me to the tapping solution, which is the Ortners. And so I start to look into this. Okay, what is this? What is this stuff? And what I know now is that what they do is EFT. It's been around for many years, but it's emotional freedom technique. And so their theory is that trauma or just things that happen to us get stored in our body as energy blocks. And so it's like our meridians or our chakras get blocked by these traumatic experiences. And to open them up, you need to tap. And that's where the tapping solution. And so it's like you tap on all these different meridian points, right? And you speak as you're tapping, like, let's say I've got pain, you have this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, this pain, and you do this whole series down your body. And I was like, okay. I mean, okay, I guess I could see that. And then it's like, so this is what you do, like for every trauma or for every pain or everything that's going. And I was like, oh, then I'm going to die sick because that's going to take me forever.
Right.
So then I started looking more into that and looking for alternate, faster types of things, or anybody who knows, because there's something about that I was like, okay, someone's telling me that my trauma might have something to do with this. And that is one angle I had not tried yet. And so my friends' voices are kind of coming up into my mind. And I was like, all right, let's look at this then. So that really opened this up and started this journey for me. And I went to a training for this stuff. It was like an EFT-based training, and thought, well, let me learn and let me see if I can get well. And I had literally a suitcase. I wasn't supposed to go anywhere. And here I'm hopping on a flight to go do this. We had
to get her a bigger suitcase so she could take all her meds with her.
Yeah.
Wow.
We had spent so much money. I think we figured it out, like out of pocket through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Somewhere around, I don't know, $100,000 for everything that I had done. So we're like, I'm on disability. I can't even work. He's not making much money. It was this whole thing. And I thought, I've got to do something, one more thing. And went to this training, and there was a lot involved in it. But one of the things that was said was that we're doing this. Basically, I'm doing it to myself.
Wow. How did that feel?
Right. Okay. So let me tell you, normal Heather would have been like, them's fighting words. Like, I'm so sick. I can't be there for my kids. You're saying I did this? I could have heard it that way, but I didn't. And I don't think that was actually the way it was meant. I think what I heard for like probably the first time in my life was, this is the way it translated in my mind. If I'm powerful enough to create in my body all of these rare diseases, what would happen if I took that same power and created this life of my dreams? Mm-hmm. And it felt, I saw it as power rather than weakness. And so from a complete negativity victim person that I was, that was really different for me to have that thought. But I believe that little mind change, that little switch started the healing in my body. And within 3 months, I was off of all meds with the help of my physicians, all of them. Mm-hmm. They helped me titrate off. I went back and I was like, I'm well. I just need my body to catch up. Mm. And these very mainstream doctors were supporting me and were like, okay, let's do this. So I remember one of the first major appointments I had was with my cardiologist. So I'd have a big one every year to go in, and I'd have to sit and I'd have to do this bike and do all this stuff and do an EKG and all of these things. This was for the POTS condition, which I'm medicated for and everything. So I literally 2 weeks after I got back had my 1 year appointment with this cardiologist. And I walk in and I have to go through all this stuff with the nurses first. They hook me up to an EKG, and he's going through my file. So I'm hooked up to the EKG, but I'm like, I'm healed, right? In my mind, I'm like, I'm good, I'm better. He starts going through my history about, and he's like, you've got, it's like, mm-hmm. This is a bad case of this, and this is.
You've got all these things.
Yeah, and like, I'm so sorry. And I kid you not, the EKG starts doing things that it wasn't doing before.
What?
When he starts telling me this stuff. And I realized, I was like, this is doing it. That's doing it. That story is doing it.
The story that you're sick.
Yes, mm-hmm. that I'm sick, and all that triggers inside of me, and all that, all the feelings that come around that. So I was like, hold on. Stop it for a second. I'm like telling the guy to just basically shut up for a second. And I was like, I need to get myself back. Because then he's like, this, and he's like, yeah, see,
yeah.
And I was like, no. So I stopped and I worked through the stuff, and the EKG started to change back.
It sounds so woohooey.
I know!
I gotta tell you.
I know it does, doesn't it?
It does.
And I was the last person in the world to be woo-woo about things.
Right.
So the guy's like, what are you doing? Are you like, because the thing starts doing different stuff. I was like, I just need to get myself back to where I was. And I put it back.
Because you'd already done all this training from your mind.
I'd already done the work. And I got myself back. I breathed, and I remembered the healing, and I remembered all the things.
And I think it's really important, which I'm sure we'll talk about this as it goes on, to talk about for someone who has no idea what this is, and they're just learning right here, that it's not just like a conscious, like, I'm just going to tell myself I'm better and I'll be better. It's like literally a subconscious that you can't just be like, power of the mind, affirmations, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Oh, it's
like,
such a good,
it's
such a good conversation.
So important to know about that. So keep going.
But I had learned subconscious tools.
Mm-hmm.
I had learned, and I'd cleared a bunch of stuff that was supporting my illness. That's the thing. When I say cleared a bunch of stuff, I changed a bunch of memories.
Right. And it's kind of like you could tell yourself all day long, I'm healthy, and the way that I'm eating is healthy for me. But if your subconscious tells you, nope, this way of eating is going to make you deteriorate, this way of eating is going to make you sick, and it's like in your subconscious, like you're not going to feel healthy. You're not going to be healthy with the way that you're eating that your consciousness is telling you is healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like Kent mentioned before, our subconscious mind runs 95% of our actions, thoughts, behaviors, reactions. So I needed to do the subconscious work to be able to consciously realize what was happening and then engage in the subconscious work to make sure I was back, accessing the resources to say, no, I am healed, I am strong, like all of these different things, which I had done in the work.
So you need to share about what the cardiologist said.
Okay, so then I go through this whole thing and I am telling him like I'm well, but I had just done 2 hours worth of testing. And he's like, so I explain, he's sitting there very stoic and everything, and I explain this whole thing that I did and how I am healed. And I did it in the power of my mind and by doing this subconscious stuff. And he was sitting there and then he's like, literally he looks around very conspiratorially and then he's like, I'm a part of a secret society.
No.
I'm not even kidding you. And he's like, where we really do harness the power of our mind. It's like some ancient Chinese thing that he's a part of. And he's like, I know what you're talking about.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so then he starts looking at my stuff new and he's like, so much of your stuff looks better. He's like, but your body, your physical health is not there yet. Because my body had just been doing this for so long. So though my mind was ready, my body needed to catch up. He was totally on board with that. So he's like, so you need to start exercising. Now for dysautonomia or POTS, you don't exercise because it's something with when your blood pressure blood pressure gets too low because of this heart thing. This is for those of you out there who are doing POTS, you're like, you're not getting it exactly right. But basically, that's what it is. And so you don't exercise because if you get overheated or whatever, you'll pass out.
Okay.
So he's like, you need to start exercising and you need to do this. And he gets on this plan of health for me to get my body caught up with my mind. And it was amazing. And then each doctor did the same thing with me. And so 3 months after this, I'm off of all meds. I'm in the gym with leg pressing like some crazy in that 450 pounds or something, stronger than I had been in so many years. But not just that, I was emotionally like opened up, so free and joyful and felt strong. And I was connected to my kids. I was connecting with my husband. It was like scales came off my eyes.
Wow.
And I was a new person.
That's amazing, Heather.
And I never thought I was going to do this. I had another job. I did this other stuff. But then I had a friend who was like totally freaked out by how quickly I got well. And she's like, do you think this would work for me? She'd been suffering from insomnia for 5 years, but like heavy duty insomnia. It affected her whole family's life. She didn't have another baby because of it. She was losing her job. Wow. Her husband was going to lose his job because she was like, it had gotten so intense. So I was like, I don't know if it will work for you. Like, we can give it a try. I did 1 session with her with my limited knowledge at the time. She never did insomnia again.
Wow.
It changed her life.
I mean, and also the same thing happened with my sister. My sister was doing insomnia. She did a session with you, 2 sessions maybe.
Yeah, 2, I think, yeah.
She does not experience insomnia anymore.
No, and it was so much other, like, layered stuff behind that. The insomnia was just the thing presenting to say, hey, we need some attention in here.
And I feel like insomnia is like so the mind. Like the mind is like, it's out of all the things, insomnia would be like one of the top ones that are like in the mind.
For sure.
Anyways, what about Kent? Well, do you have more to your story? How was that for you guys as a relationship?
So, like she said, she was like opening up. She was stronger physically, but also, again, that was a metaphor for her emotional strength. And it was amazing to see my wife go from like carrying her to the bathroom at times and, taking care of 2 kids and work and all this stuff to her being just life of the party. I mean, she was like, let's have people over, let's do this. So it was incredible. I was so supportive. That's you keep getting well, you keep dealing with your past and your trauma, because I came from a very, very different family life. I grew up where I would have said no trauma. Very, my parents still together, still loving each other, my sister, whatever, like very, I'll say sheltered home. And everything was kind of going in one sense my way, the way that I wanted life to go. I was married, I had kids, like these are all the things I wanted. It was great. And so she started getting like really well emotionally, and I started tanking emotionally. It was weird. It was like I was the one who was always, come on, let's go. Let's, you've got it. Let's go. Everything's great. Look at the bright side. That was kind of me. And all of a sudden, she's happy and doing well physically, emotionally, and I started to just go in a spiral. But I didn't really realize that. At the time, it was just like, oh, I guess I was in a funk or whatever. That was just like the most annoying thing. My wife, I feel like you're in a funk today. No, I'm not. But yeah, it was, something happened. Something was triggering me, and I didn't know what. And she eventually felt like, I'm well. Are you not happy that I'm well? Like, what's going on? No, I'm so excited for you. Long story short, I kind of had a lot of good coping skills of things are good, things are fine, things are whatever. And it took me probably 2 years, year and a half, to being like, no, this is great, your thing, keep getting well, to realizing I got issues, I got stuff. Right. But I didn't really know what that was or how deep it went. I just knew that there was stuff. So again, I started going into, okay, let's deal with this. Let me imitate, let me understand how the mind works, how it's connected to our body, all these things. And the dive was very deep for me because I thought just touch up a few things. And all of a sudden I opened this entire life that she had the scales fall off of her. I had scales on, but they were different scales. They were scales of everything's perfect. And so when those came off, that's why things were so hard for me. It's like, oh my goodness, my parents weren't perfect. My life wasn't great going, and all these different things. And so I went through a process for sure, a very different process than her. It was emotional, but how did it affect our relationship? It was hard, like really hard. Like you think, oh, she's getting freer. That's awesome. Because I was so wound up and so tight, so closed off that when she got freer, it was a threat to me emotionally. It was a threat on so many different levels. So I started doing the work, started getting into it, really started training myself in as many things as I could with the mind-body connection as she had. And things started opening up. And that was a big, big thing. But I had to realize there was a lot of emotional trauma growing up, and a lot of that was just stuffed. And so anger, bad. Feeling disappointed, bad. These are just things I didn't do anymore. And if there was something really sensitive, like our sexual relationship or anything there, it was like, oh, let's not talk about those. Everything's fine. Everything's good. And so there were so many things pent up that we just didn't talk about or that I didn't open up to because I couldn't bear to see anything wrong with myself. But when I did finally open those things up, that's when things in our relationship started changing. That's when things in my life started changing. And so it's not just the physical. Some people it affects physically, but trauma affects people emotionally. And that's where I was at, relationally, emotionally, in my job. Everything was just blah, 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 until it wasn't, until I was able to actually deal with it.
That's incredible because you're coming from two completely opposite spectrums and both of you saying everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Listen, if you're going to do certain coping skills, which we all do to some degree.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Like, everything's good. Everything's fine. But the fact of the matter is then you're not really in touch. Like, it's very difficult to inhabit your body and feel all your feelings and be in touch with other people and humanity when everything's fine all the time. Because it's not.
Right.
It just isn't. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got to be negative Nancy or, all of that stuff, whatever that means. But we can feel it and we can have health around it emotionally and physically. But so many of us are not taught that. I mean, whose parents were these like beacons of emotional intelligence? And that's not saying anything negative about anybody.
Right.
Who taught them? Who taught their parents? We live in a society of kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just move on. And or you're on that other side where you're this like sensitive, fragile person. It's like we've got these two extremes. And we don't have to live in these extreme places.
So then you want to be in the middle ground is what you're saying? Like somewhere in the middle?
Or just maybe not even, maybe just in our bodies. And
Really in tune with what we're really feeling.
Yeah, in tune with our experience with the world. You know, so
Right.
for instance, I take issue with and teach a lot around empathy being emotional suicide, which is, it's a big trigger
Okay,
warning.
so explain this. What
I
do you
know.
mean? What do you mean by this?
Okay, so empathy is like the big thing now. What empathy really means is that you're trying to feel people's feelings, and that's how you connect, is by feeling people feel what they're going through.
Or at least understand what they're going
Well,
through, right?
understand is compassion.
Okay. Yes.
Feel their feelings. Be there with them is empathy.
Okay.
Feel
Okay.
with someone, feel for someone.
So I understand I feel like this push for empathy is a reaction of us being really discompassionate. Is that a word? Whatever. Of ourselves and other people. So we kind of go to this other place of like, the only way to connect with someone is to feel what they're feeling. And I think that it sounds good. But when we really do it, it gets heavy. And this is where we have you ever heard of tertiary trauma?
No.
It's secondary trauma. It's we see it in doctors, caregivers.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes even mothers and stuff like that. It's that you're so carrying someone else's stuff,
Yeah.
trying to feel their stuff and be there for them, that you're actually becoming traumatized by their trauma.
That's a really
That's
good way
why
to
the
explain it.
Career that has the top suicide count is psychologists, because they're unintentionally possibly, but taking on
didn't
so
know
much
that.
stuff. Yeah.
Well, a lot of caregivers, and we get caregiver burnout and everything. It's because they're being told, be empathetic, get into their stuff, feel their feelings, because you don't want this cold brick wall trying to help you out.
Right.
But you really can't do that. You can't feel another person's feelings. We actually can't do that. You can filter through your own personal stuff to try to imagine what it would feel like to feel their feelings.
Yeah.
But you can't actually feel their feelings. So I teach about something called compassionate empathy, which is just using the two words of saying, like, if you're as present as you can be in your body, having dealt with your stuff, you're really able to open this space for someone and hold them in this space of their highest self. And even if they don't show up into that space as their highest self, you still know that they're capable of that, and that if they're doing whatever it is they're doing, they must have a really good reason for it.
That's really beautiful.
And it allows us to be like, I'm here with you.
Yeah, there for
Not
you.
feeling your feelings,
But there for you.
but there for you.
Right. It's that thing of so often we think we need to feel for somebody or with somebody. And if the example you like to use is if someone's in a pit, right? Someone falls into a pit. What are we going to jump in the pit with them so that we can really? Then no one's able to get out, right? No,
Yes.
be the strong one. See that they're in a pit. Help them out of the pit
If they want help.
if they want it.
Right, which we'll get into, right?
Yes.
Okay, before we ask that, which I'm really excited to get into that topic, like specifically, but before we get into that, can you explain a little more in depth to make it less woohooey, right?
Yes.
Like, what is the neuroscience behind it, the biochemistry of the brain that really makes this as possible as your experience was?
Okay. That was huge for me because I came in from an EFT perspective. And though I didn't believe in energy then, I definitely believe in it now, but not in a woo-woo sense. Like, it's science now.
We're made up of energy and matter.
Okay, so what does it say? What is the science then about it?
So if you want to know anything about us and the energy that we have and how that, some people call it spirit, some people call it energy or life, whatever it is, Dr. Joe Dispenza has all the research.
Okay.
He's done the work of that. And
The brain
get into
scans,
his stuff.
yeah.
So I was able to take from him and go, okay, energy is actually quantifiable. And if it can be measured, it's real. And then they've shown so many amazing effects of that. So utilizing that. Then, of course, I did EFT. But I also then started studying, okay, here's the thing. I started seeing that EFT wasn't working for some people. And even for myself and for other people who were using it and doing it, practitioners, it didn't stop working, but there were certain things it wouldn't work with, or things would come back.
For certain people, it wouldn't work for.
Certain people, they're like, this doesn't work.
Everyone's different.
Everyone's different. But I was like, wow, I wanted to know more why. And the idea of energy was one thing, but I was like, there's got to be more to this. So that's when I took a step back and I started diving into the neuroscience. I knew our brain was a component. So I was like, let me get into the neuroscience. And it's all there. And so to do it in a layman's term, because we can get really nitty gritty and in a lot of research about this, but I'll make it easy by saying remember, we're a whole being, and we're cyclical in the sense that a thought, let's say you drop a hammer on your toe, okay?
Yeah.
The way that works is your toe will send information up to your brain, and it says, hey, this happened. It's not sending pain. Pain is not, it's not like sending pain, it's sending messages.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I know.
I feel like that's not how we're most commonly understanding
we have pain
it.
nerves, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not,
like
it's
we're
not
most commonly taught that, like, oh, it goes to the brain. The pain tells you you're in pain. The brain, it tells the brain that you're in pain.
It tells the brain that you're in pain.
Yeah.
No, the brain is what filters and says this is pain.
Okay.
Because for us, pain gets at attention. And the toe needs attention. So the brain, it sends the messages up. The brain goes, okay, well, let's send down pain. And pain, because an inflammation, right? It sends inflammation, it sends blood down, it sends heat down because heat brings it comes from the blood and it heals.
Right.
It's meant to heal. And also it brings our conscious awareness down there. So people think that we have pain nerves. Even doctors will talk about pain nerves or nerve pain. It isn't, and doctors, you know that this is true, but we just don't talk about this. That we don't have pain nerves.
Okay.
We have nerves that carry information. So we're cyclical in that. The brain, it comes up, the brain goes, okay, send pain down. It sends the pain messages down. The toe goes, ow,
Right.
I'm in pain, I need help. Then we do whatever. The toe sends messages back up to the brain to tell it how it's going, right? And we get this feedback loop. It's a constant feedback loop.
That's interesting.
But this is how we do everything. So this is how when we're being built as little people, everything that happens to us gets brought in through our subconscious mind. We're through all of our senses. Everything we see, hear, taste, touch, feel, smell is coming in.
Okay, can I interject for a little bit?
Please.
So this is actually making me think of Koufax, because those first maybe 5-6 owies that he has gotten, he had there was no crying, he didn't even react. It was so crazy. We were like, this kid doesn't care at all if he gets hurt. Like, he would scrape all of his toes and be super bleeding while he was playing on the skateboard and just walk inside, not even care. Okay, but after the 5 or 6 time when he sees how his siblings react to oh no, Koufax is bleeding, oh no, get him a Band-Aid, oh no, and everyone's freaking out, right? Now when he sees blood, he's like, oh no, and he starts crying.
Yes.
But he didn't actually cry before. But can you really say that for extreme? You get shot in the stomach, right? You can't be you can't say you don't get pain from something like that.
Actually,
right?
a lot of people who get shot in the stomach don't feel pain right away.
Well, yes, right? When you see war movies, you see how they get shot and they're in this crazy fight or flight mode. They don't even realize until they can calm down, and then they actually look, and then they start to faint, right? After they look at it.
Yes.
But how can you really say that they're not going to, if you train your brain properly, you wouldn't experience extreme pain from an extreme physical trauma?
Well, we're not trying to take pain out of the equation completely.
Pain's good, actually.
Yes,
It's
okay, so
helpful.
talk about that.
When pain is used as communication, it's good. You want to know, because there's, if you heard about that syndrome, and I can't think of what it's called right now, where people actually don't feel pain. The pain receptors in their body are blocked.
Right.
They don't feel pain.
It's important.
Most of them don't live very long.
Okay, that makes sense, yes. Okay.
You need to have some communication. The problem is we've gotten so dissociated from ourselves that pain, that we're not trusting our intuition, we're not listening to ourselves, we haven't taken care of ourselves. I'll care for someone else, and we put ourselves away again and again, or we deal with all this trauma, all this thing happens to us and we've never done anything about it. Then the body starts to go, you don't listen to me. You don't hear me. You don't take care of me.
Right.
So I'm going to scream a little louder.
Right.
And that's what my body was doing. I see it now. Now I see all that stuff as loving messages from my body that it kept hollering.
That's
It just
beautiful.
kept trying to get my attention. Now I see all of those diseases that I did are loving. So when people are like, you're saying I did this to myself, I'm saying I did it to myself, but for such good reasons. And now I see it completely all as love. Now it sucked, and I didn't want it to keep happening that way. So I needed to deal with what was happening and what my body was trying to tell me. And now over time, I've built this trust with my body that, yeah, if I slam my hand in a door, I get pain because it needs to do that. But actually, I can not keep the pain for a long time. And Kent's got a great story about this. I also have this big tattoo that I did in one sitting with no pain until the last hour when I was over it. Yeah. And I was like, ah! So I lost I was like, I'm done. But I did the whole thing with no pain because I'm like, this is my choice. I'm doing this to myself. And I knew I didn't need pain about it.
Right.
And so I was able to do that. But if I was trying to block a message of like, I'm being injured, then that's incongruent with my body, and that's
not necessarily helpful.
That's not what I would want to do.
So was there something you were going to say, a story though, that Kent was going to say?
I mean, I don't know how many years ago. This was at our Paia house a few years ago. I was outside, we were having people over, and so one of our side door, our back door, I was trying to tell everyone, hey, come on inside, we're going to eat or whatever. And so I opened the door and kind of swing it open, and I put my hand here talking to them, and then Heather's trying to talk to me. And so I'm like, oh, what's up? And then a huge gust of wind comes. Now, our back door is steel.
Oh, shoot.
It's like a full out, exterior door, and it just goes wham right on my hand. And I'm just like, oh, a steel door in your hand, something's going to happen. So I immediately, there's some people that they're like, oh my goodness, are you okay? I immediately go to the other side of the house and I just start working on myself for like 10, 15 minutes. What I remember feeling, seeing, all the different things that we do, that's kind of hard to explain, but I was working on myself. 10 minutes later or so, I come back inside and I'm like, I'm okay. No swelling, no broken anything,
wow.
No like whatever. And it really should have left a massive, it should have
broke
blown
his fingers.
up. It should have whatever, right?
Wow,
so I did this
crazy.
work, and then now I'm not stupid. So I also, Heather's like, do you want an ice pack? I'm like, well, it actually feels okay now. Now it was hurting, like at the beginning. It wasn't like I just never hurt. No, it was like really bad. But I worked on it, and then it didn't hurt anymore. And then I put ice on it because that's what's smart to do.
Yeah.
And then the next day I was like, oh yeah, I can see that there was like a little like it's tight.
The next morning,
okay, I forgot.
He wakes up and he's like, my hand hurts.
That's right.
And I'm like, is it bad? And he's like, what do you mean? He forgot.
But
he was like, my hand hurts a little bit. But he's going like this. And I'm like, and he had forgotten that had happened. And I was like, the door slammed. He's like, oh yeah. He's got this massive line of bruising across his knuckles. But he had forgotten even what had happened. So was just like, I don't know why my hand is hurting.
Wow, that's an insane story.
I know.
So are you guys saying that like it's all just the trauma that you need to deal with, or what role does like a healthy lifestyle like play into that? Is it all just dealing with trauma, or is there more to it than that?
No, you could have you could do one or the other. It's not one or the other, right? If you deal with your trauma, but you're still treating your body like trash and eating junk and whatever else, like that's not going to be good either, really.
Right.
Versus, I'm like doing all the right health things, but you're not dealing with stuff. Your body's not going to integrate those healthy things well either.
Like it's
right?
both. It's basically both.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's holistic.
And it really has to do mostly with our motivation. If you're eating well and changing your lifestyle and all of this stuff because you feel like a big fat pig, right? Like if that's your mindset and you hate your body and you're doing all of these things, you can change your lifestyle. And for a little while, you might start to feel better again. But I guarantee you, if you're doing that to feel better, then it's going to come out some other way. So it's our belief system. It's how we believe, what we believe about ourselves, who we are, deeply, subconsciously in our core.
So what would be the opposite of that then? Someone who's doing it with not that subconscious, what would be the other end of the spectrum?
Such a great question. Okay, so I'll use a really relevant example. We have a client right now here doing a private retreat. I didn't know this about her, but she came, she just read the book. She's lost 32 pounds without even trying. her blood pressure went down. She had high blood pressure. It went completely down. Her bad cholesterol went completely down. So she's telling me all of this stuff. And I know it's because she started feeling good about herself. She was dealing with a lot of the core stuff and about memories and how she felt as a child. And in her mind, she was like, I feel like going out and exercising. Like, I feel like feeding my body good food.
I want to take care of
You
myself
want to do
versus
it?
I have to or I should.
Exactly. I'm on the same page as you guys about that. I'm so about the mind-body connection as well as the lifestyle practices, living in a way that's healthy for your body, inside and out. And that if you have that positive outlook on yourself, you will naturally want to do those things.
Right.
Yes. And that's our like factory default setting, is to feel good about ourselves. And it's everything that we're born into and given and what we see that tells us otherwise. And we have to deal with that programming. We have to. We will only output what was input. And you can positive affirm all day long. And we were just talking with some of our course students about this, about the use of positive affirmations.
Yeah, actually, let's get into that, because I was going to ask you, like, what is the difference between what you guys are doing with mind change and compared to all the other types of things like law of attraction, positive affirmations, even you bringing up EFT and tapping? Like, what are you doing that's different?
Well, I'll start off by just saying mind change is a conglomeration of a lot of different modalities and things that we studied out. And one of the things that Heather was honing in on is, why does EMDR work for this person and not for this person? Why does EFT work for this issue and not that issue? Like, all these different things. And so what we tried to do is figure out the why, like why it works. And it's all having to do with the way that person represents, or the representational systems that they use to input memory. And so certain things, so what we've tried to do with mind change is take all the things that work, and we're going to work with a client, and it's not going to be the same every time. It's not like one program of this thing she was saying earlier, or just do this or whatever. It's going to be different depending on the person. And so we're going to take that person where they're at, how they input things, and then reconstruct, deconstruct, and create new neural pathways for them. So I just wanted to start off by saying it's not just this random thing that we made up. We pulled from as many good things as we could, changing whatever we needed to, add our own flair to things, and then so I'll let you share about the positive affirmation stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's such a good point. I was going to mention that we looked into, of course, EFT, EMDR, DNRS, NLP.
I don't know what any of those things are.
Re-imprinting.
Matrix re-imprinting.
I mean,
Yeah,
so many different
because
things.
they all had, like, you'd hear these amazing stories of these healing stories from these people. And then you'd hear someone, I tried it, didn't work. And I was like, oh, there's got to be something. So I started researching how we create memories and how that gets stored in our subconscious mind. And we have all these like things of, well, positive thought therapy and say your affirmations and even, so many different things out there. And you'll always have the person that's like, it didn't work for me. So with this stuff, it takes how we work neurobiologically across the board. Like, all humans are going to have that feedback loop, right? All of us do it. All humans utilize memory, and memory, the way that we reconsolidate memories or put them in and put them in, is done the same. And all the way that they're represented is through one system. All of that is for every human being.
Right.
So when you step back at it and look, you're like, oh,
Right.
oh, this is why all of this stuff works when it works and why it doesn't when it doesn't. And so we put something together that works for anybody, for anything, all the time.
Wow.
So I'll use positive thought therapy as an example, or
And if I can
positive
just say,
affirmations.
I just want to say thank you to all the people that have gone before us, because
Right.
I don't think any of these, someone asked, well, is this not good because I've been doing this? And I was like, no, everything is good. You just got to figure out what works for you.
Yes.
So all those modalities are great.
Right.
They're incredible. We just kind of took the best of the best.
And even like I mentioned before, our reductionist way of educating health professionals is great for those of us who have to stay aligned with one way of thinking. We can step back and go, that's brilliant, put it all together. And that's really what mind change is.
That's really beautiful.
So let's take a positive affirmation. Let's say that you might realize something in your life is maybe you feel like you're not good enough. and it keeps reoccurring in different ways. You're like, you know what? I'm going to start affirming. I'm going to start law of attraction, like speaking it out. I'm going to call it into existence. This I am worthy. I am worthy. I am worthy. And you can put your little stickers up and you can write your little things down. So if in your subconscious mind, every time you say I am worthy, your mind hears it, right? And it brings up all of the proof of whether that's true or not. If in your subconscious mind you hold a load of proof that you're not worthy, then every time you say I am worthy, your brain's going to go, no, you're not. And here's all the reasons why.
Right. Exactly.
And it reinforces those neural pathways.
Right.
It makes them stronger.
Fires them up every single time. So the example I like to give is if someone has a pet and they have a dog and the dog poops in the middle of the kitchen, what do?
Clean it up.
Clean it up, right? Like that's what you do. Now, you could put a mat over it, right? Just like, hey, we're just going to make sure this is you could spray it, you could potpourri it, you could Febreze it, you could do all these things. You could make it look pretty. You could even put like a little table with flowers and all this stuff. But if you don't clean it up, what's still underneath of it?
The poop.
Right. So you can positive affirm your life as much as you want, but you actually have to get rid of the poop in your life, the negative thoughts, the trauma, the stuff that we've been holding on to. You have to let go of that in order for there to be beautiful flowers that actually matter. In order for there to be, you can put a mat there. You can do whatever you want. But you've got to be able to take the old out before putting the new in.
Right.
Because even think positive affirmation. An affirmation is anything you affirm. Mm-hmm. So if we're trying to affirm these positive things because actually we don't feel them, then we're not. What we're affirming is the thing that we feel actually, what we have proof for. That's when positive affirmations don't work.
Right.
Now clean the house, clean it up. Rewire, change the neural pathways. Now you can be like, I am worthy, and your brain goes,
yeah, you are.
Here's the proof.
Yes, you are. Yes.
Yes, you are, and here's all the reasons why. And it reinforces those neural pathways.
So I have a question. It might be really frustrating for someone who has experienced maybe mental illness their whole life or a physical ailment their whole life to be told that, like, you just have to change your mind.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts for the topics of like toxic positivity, victim shaming, not being inclusive to those who are going through something? Like, how do you respond to that?
So what we want to say with Mind Change is this: not everybody's gonna jibe with this message, right? It isn't for everybody. It wouldn't have been for me. I'll tell you right now, had you said, I wouldn't have heard these things the way I know them now. I would have heard it my filters were too thick. Those illnesses were keeping me safe.
Like if you were told earlier, if you were in the place that you just so happened to be in that right spot in your mind where you were ready to try maybe anything.
Yeah, because I was going to die. That was my other option.
Right.
So I really got to that sort of rock bottom. You don't have to hit rock bottom, but you do have to be at that place where it's like, I'm going to challenge what I think I know. I'm going to challenge my filters.
Right.
Or at least I'm going to consider that I might have filters.
Yes.
So if that would have been so triggering for me to hear, like I said, when it said you're doing this to yourself, that my illnesses were stuff that I was doing
versus having,
rather than things that I had.
Yeah.
Whoo, that would have been a trigger
Yes.
fiesta for
Yes.
me before. But I was in a place where I was like, could that be? And it changed everything.
And your mind was in the right place to hear it.
Yes.
Because most people, I don't know if this is like most or not, but like you really don't want to be like, oh, you're doing mental illness. You
Right.
know, like that's a lot of people wouldn't receive that well.
No,
Right.
part of the reason they're doing mental illness is because it's a protection mechanism anyway, for good reason. I can't
Yeah, we have
stress
to
that enough.
remember
Yes.
that everyone's doing an illness or an emotional issue or a mental issue, whatever, for really, really good reason. And so with Mind Change, we come from a place of, again, you're doing this for a good reason, and we're going to give you that space. Like there's no judgment, and when you're ready, your mind will get there. Kind of like Heather. I mean, she was on this journey of being ill. Why didn't she get ill, or why didn't she get better 2 years earlier, right? She wasn't in a place to hear it, even though there were people telling her, have you thought about it? She wasn't there. For my relationship with Heather, I mean, it took kind of us getting to like a place in our relationship before I decided, okay, maybe there's something that I need
Be willing to look at yourself.
Right. And and that's okay. Everyone's where they're at. And I don't think that it's wasting time to, well, I'm not ready for this. That's okay. When you are, you are.
Yeah, everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah.
And like, so specifically then about trauma, what is trauma? Because like you're saying, it's not just those who have experienced sexual abuse or extremely hard childhoods or circumstances, but it can also be someone who was raised in, you know, a regular childhood with sweet loving parents. And so what is trauma exactly then?
So trauma, well, do you want to share? Or?
Go for it.
Trauma is trauma. For one person, trauma can be rape. That's a trauma. Mm-hmm. For another person, it can be, you know, a third grade, a teacher giving you a dirty look or something like that. Yeah. Now, I'm not judging which one's worse. They're both bad for the person at the time, and they're both not good in general, right? Like but trauma is trauma, and so it's not that, well, this doesn't really matter, let's deal with this. No, let's deal with both. Let's deal with everything.
Right. I don't think you're necessarily trying to be like, oh, you know, a teacher giving you a bad look is just as bad as someone being raped. You're not saying that, just to be clear. I think I know you well enough. I know you well enough to know what you're saying. I think it's more so that, like, let's deal with both. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You got to deal with whatever is there. It doesn't matter about level of judgment. It's just, hey, there's trauma here. So in our relationship, you know, I mean, for her, trauma was being beaten or sexually abused when she was a kid. Like, that was her trauma. For me, I remember even when we got married, like, her raising her voice a little bit was trauma to me.
Stop yelling at me!
Okay,
I was like...
I was a baby. So, but that's
I don't like being yelled at either, though.
No, right. But what we perceive as someone yelling at us...
Right, she was just raising her voice versus, like, get out of it. You know, for me, it was trauma. Mm-hmm. And so what, am I just, like, weaker because I have less, you know? No, it has to do with how I take it in. And trauma is trauma is trauma. So we need to deal with both, is the point.
And I love Dr. Gabor Mate. He's big in the trauma field right now. And he says trauma is anything that causes a response in our autonomic nervous system. Anything that our body feels like it needs to respond to can be trauma. So, and that's what people don't fully understand is trauma. When something happens to us, depending on the way that we see the world, our view of the world, when something happens to us, our body will respond to it. Mm-hmm. And how our body responds to it can be a traumatic response. If it puts all the lights on, I was thinking about an example, a metaphor of kind of like a smart house. Like, you move into this beautiful house, and it's a smart house, and it can, you know, it learns with you, and it's got mechanisms to keep you safe. Right? And so you're safe, everything's good, but something happens, and let's say you get broken into and maybe tied up and robbed. I mean, everything now is like, you're on high alert. So you get your systems buffed up, which you should, right? In your mind, you should. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't have enough stuff happening. Well, the problem is now you've got a smart house. So it's like, what is danger? All it's looking for now is danger. Mm-hmm. So now danger becomes anything that moves out in the night. Yeah. And any light, when the lights turn on, and then the person inside's like, with everything. Right. For when things become so dangerous for so long, and and their house is like, danger, danger, danger. Yeah. Eventually we get desensitized to the danger. Mm-hmm. Or people come over. Let's say you've invited people over and you forget that you didn't tell your smart house that people were coming over. People come up and it starts alert, you know, danger, alert, alert, alert. And because you're programmed to, when it goes off, that's the only thing keeping me safe. Mm-hmm. You get into this complete heightened state. Yeah. So you're hiding in the closet, you're hiding in your safe room, and your people who you invited over are out there like, hello. Yeah. Okay, this now starts to affect your relationships, because now these people are like, what is going on? Didn't she invite me over? Is this okay? What's happening? Yeah. Why is this all happening? Right? Then you finally come to the door. You're all like, and they're like, are you okay? And you're like, yeah, I don't know. I'm freaked out. I forgot in this house and everything. Yeah. So now your friend, and you're like, Yeah. Right. And then, okay, now everything's okay. So you see where I'm going with this. Over time, it affects other people too.
Mm-hmm.
You're just on high alert. So oftentimes these people who've been struggling and they're doing mental illness and everything like this, or physical illness, their body is in this response. And people have to respond to their responses. And they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
But it starts to affect everything. It affects their relationships, it affects their work, and it becomes this identity. Which it would be hard not to.
Right.
Because it's affecting everything.
Even small things within my own childhood, I have like attached to part of my identity. And I realize that sometimes, like, oh, okay, why do I hold on to this so much? You know?
Yes. Well, we were just talking about, the holidays are coming up, and so many people have a lot of trauma wrapped up into the holidays. And we were talking with some of our course students about this in a mentoring call, about preparing yourself for the holidays and explaining the neurobiology behind why holidays tend to be so triggering for people. It's because all of our senses are heightened. We're smelling unique things and seeing unique things, and it's triggering everyone, and usually to the good, right? So many people love the holidays. It's like you can't help yourself. You hear the music and you see the glitter and you're like, ooh, you smell the food and the cinnamon, and you get these giddy feelings. Those feelings are simply a result of your brain pulling up these memories and attaching it to
Positive things.
Right. So can we go into a little bit about my personal experience then with you with mind change?
Yes.
I know I've talked about it on my YouTube channel before, so people can go and watch that video. I'll put the link in the show notes for people to watch that. So we don't need to get like 100% into it. But what you just said there was so important, because that was when you guys decided to help me with this. Well, let me explain it. I was pregnant with my third, and I really wanted a shorter labor this time. I had 2 home births already, wonderful home births. I loved the experience, but they were very, very painful and very, very long. And I had told you, because you were talking to me about this mind change thing, and I was like, would it work with like labor? Like, can I make my labor go quicker? Can I make my labor be like less painful? And you were like, yes, 100%. And I'm like, what? Like,
I've never done it before, by the way. I was like, it's gotta work, right?
Yeah. Oh, so you'd never done it specifically for labor?
Never.
And now you've done so many.
No, holy moly.
So many. Okay.
So many.
Yeah, after we talked about it. And you're like, 100%, Ellen, you can. And I was so excited about that idea, because I really wanted a shorter labor. My first 2 labors were like 24 and 26 hours long. And I would have loved to be one of those stories where I was like, yeah, labor felt good, You hear those stories, they're a rarity, but you're like, that's not me. I can't do that. And so I was really open to that, but I still was skeptical. And you're like, yeah, just come over. Me and Kent will do this session on you for like, I think it was like a 2-hour thing. It was actually only like 4 days before I went into labor. Like we pushed it towards the end. We're like, let's just do it right at the end. I'm like going into it totally skeptical but open, like, okay. And you're like, good thing is though, Ellen, that even if you don't believe that it'll work, it's still gonna work. And I was like, what? Isn't it all about the mind? I was like, all right, so we do the thing. And it was so funny because I don't even remember the things you were saying. People should go watch the YouTube video of like when we give the detailed message. But I started to feel contractions when you were telling me to feel those contractions. Like, and of course I was close to labor, so that it makes sense, especially. But I was like, that's weird. Like, I literally was feeling what contractions feel like. And you had asked me, what do you want your labor to be? I was like, I would love for my labor to be 8 hours long and to like feel like it felt good, to feel like it felt just empowering and just not painful. And you're like, okay, change the word from not painful to like something else. Like, what do you want it to feel like? You had me label exactly the sensations I wanted it to feel like. And I'll be darned, my labor was 8 hours long and exactly to the T of what I was envisioning and hoping for. I couldn't even believe it. I was on such a high from Scout's birth. It was like, even though the first one is like the most like incredible, like just awestrucking, like you pull a gooey baby out of your vagina and you're like, what just happened? How did I do this? But Scout's birth was like just so transformative for me because I was in control. And you had told me like, you have this identity that labor is supposed to be hard. And we kind of pulled back from like, what was my version growing up of what labor was supposed to be, and it all came down to my first memory of what labor was supposed to look like was my Aunt Jane, love you Aunt Jane, she's probably listening, telling me about my mom's labor and how she was there, and it was so long and it was over 40 hours and she just couldn't get you out, so she had to have a C-section. It was so painful and so long. So like in my head, labor was long, labor was painful. And so it was almost like this prideful thing I attached to it. Like, I did it. It was so hard, but I did it. And the thing is, like, that's all fine and great if you want to do that. But when I was like, I don't want to do that this time.
Right.
I want it to feel good and to be shorter, because I thought the second one would surely be shorter. Everyone tells me a second one's shorter, it goes so much faster. And when it didn't go faster, I was so mad. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Why is it just as long? Yes. And it was like this thing that I was like, labor's long. That's just what it's supposed to be. So when you did this, like literally just a few days later, I literally got the birth of my dreams. I remember smiling through the contractions. There was a moment of weakness where I don't know if weakness is the word, but you're like, no, don't use that word. No.
Because it wasn't weakness.
Right. It was just doubt.
remembering.
It was doubt.
It was doubt.
Yeah.
And it was good reason for doing it.
Yeah.
Because you got into that space where it's about to happen.
Yeah.
But then you
and I called you over because Heather's like, I'm right here on call if you want me to come over, because Andrew's like, yeah, for sure, I'll get Heather over here when you want it. Because I started to be like, at first I'm like, yes, I'm doing this, it's gonna go quick and it's feeling good, but then it started to not feel good, and I was like, oh no, I can't do it, I'm not doing it right, it's painful. And then it felt even worse, and it felt way worse. So then Heather comes over here in the middle of the night. I'm out in like our yard in the middle of the night wearing a robe, and I don't remember what you said, but you said something to me, and it got me back on track. And I started to be like, yes, I can do this, I am doing this, I'm doing it how I want it. And I was so in control to the point that I'm not even kidding, I told my body when to give birth, exactly when and where. Like, it was crazy, I couldn't even believe it. And I realized I was like going through the motions, and I wasn't giving birth even though it was getting close to the 8 hours. And then I realized, I hadn't told my birth team to come yet, because I was so like in my head, they don't need to come, it's gonna be a while, because that's what my first two were like. And then I was like, wait, no, they have to come for me to feel comfortable to give birth. Like, my story, my vision, my plan was like, they're gonna be there. And I don't know, it's hard because it's like, are you in control? Are you not? I get both sides completely, but in this particular experience, I was as soon as they got there, I was like, okay, I'm going to have one more contraction outside, I'm going to look at the moon, and then I'm going to come inside, get in the tub, and then I'm going to push and give birth. And that's exactly what I did. I couldn't even believe it. It was just, as soon as like my midwife got there, she was there for the Sandy's birth too. And the first time when she came, or Sandy's where she's like, you got a ways to go. And I was like, what? I was like, how much longer? And she's like, you're one contraction closer to giving birth. I'm like, ew. don't tell me that. Say that. But then when she came with Scout, she's like, you're moving right along. You're about there. And I was like, I am? Like, even though I knew that I was, it was just crazy. Anyways, it was so euphoric. I couldn't believe it. I was on such a high, not only the fact that I had just given birth, but the fact that I did it how I wanted it, and I was in complete control. It was just an insane experience. So that was incredible to do that with you guys. I couldn't even believe it. How you guys were just so
special.
So special. Do you have, maybe like wrapping it up, do you want to tell maybe one or two other testimonials that you've had personally with helping other people?
Yeah. Well, since we're on the story of births and things, I'll share a client story. So I worked with this woman who, she's great. She had some health stuff that she wanted to get over. Some beliefs, some different things. So we worked, this is about a year ago or 9 months ago or something, we worked together. And it was great. I think she had done some insomnia, some other things. I did 2 sessions with her, and she was just where she wanted to be. She felt healthy, she felt good. And I, followed up with her a little bit later, like, how you doing? Her health was great, everything was good. She was sleeping great, like everything was just great. One of the things that she wanted to work on specifically was she didn't believe that she could get pregnant because of her health. That belief, just like Aunt Jane, is that her name?
Yeah.
That belief came from doctors saying, well, this is your health and this is where you're at. So I'm not sure that, having babies is in your alley kind of a thing. And so she started to believe that. So we worked through all of that stuff and kind of, pushed forward to what is the future going to be. And she could see having a baby. It was great. I didn't hear from her after, a little bit. I didn't hear from her for about, 6 months, 9 months. I ended up working with her mom and all these different things. She got a hold of me a handful of months ago, and she said, hey, guess what? I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And so, in a short time, she got pregnant. She wanted to do a session just about like how she was feeling. She was feeling kind of anxious about the pregnancy and things like that. Great. We did a session. Everything's good. She feels great about it. She knows it's going to go smooth. So I say, great, fill me in when the time's there. A couple of weeks later, now she was going to give me a testimony, and a couple of weeks later I was like, hey, can you, let me know what's going on? And she said, I'm not sure I can. I just found out that I actually had a miscarriage. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I basically wrote her and I said, hey, listen, I'm happy just because I loved working with you. I'm happy to help you through that grief. Let's do a session. I'm just going to give it to you pro bono. I'll just give it to you. Let's do a session together. She was like, oh, that'd be great. So a week and a half goes by. She gets back to me and she's like, hey, don't know if you still want to give me a free session, but I actually had worked through some things. I went to a doctor and realized I didn't have a miscarriage. So there was a few weeks where it was about, I think it was 18 days, where she was told you're having a miscarriage, to 18 days later, oh my goodness, you have a healthy child growing inside of you.
What?
Now,
I know.
So much of this.
Do they sometimes get miscarriages wrong? I want to know.
I know. I've never heard of that.
I mean, she was bleeding.
But I'm
This
sure.
is,
Yeah.
So regardless, she had done all of this work. And I will tell you, I have a deep, deep belief that the work that she did, letting go of, grief from before, letting go of, oh no, am I going to get pregnant? And then even fast forwarding to what this pregnancy is going to be, what this birth is going to be like, what it's going to be like to hold my child, all these different things that she had rewired. I'm telling you, I really believe that she saved that baby from her own power from within. So I did this session with her a couple weeks ago, and just really letting go of any other fears that are, and she is just pumped. She's like, man, this baby is healthy, and it is medically, and she's just so excited about the birth. We walked through a lot of different things. So it was really cool to go from I can't have babies to, oh my goodness, I can, and I'm pregnant, to, oh, what's going to happen? I might lose this baby. I did lose this baby, to, no, I worked through it and I saved this baby.
Wow,
So
that is
really, really
that's
cool.
an incredible story.
I know.
Wow.
We have so many. It's hard to. We very much protect client confidentiality. We don't use the names or anything. We don't actually do a ton of testimonials just because so much of what people come to us with is very deep and personal.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are countless stories of people healing massive traumas, incest, rape, like things that they were in therapy with for so many years that they've been able to overcome. Chronic illnesses, I mean, so many things.
Relationship, marriage stuff. I mean, anything.
Eczema, I mean, we get there's a lot of eczema happening right now. And a lot of doctors will tell you eczema is like, you can't heal eczema. Like, you can treat it, but
Oh my
you
gosh,
can't
of
heal
course
it.
you can heal eczema.
Right. And then, what the reason is behind it, and use this cream or that cream or whatever. And so we've had a lot of people who come in and then don't do the eczema anymore. A lot of mental health stuff. And the mental health one is really tricky for people to get to the place where they feel like they can address it. Like it's something that maybe they are doing, but for very good reason. And so really incredible stuff with the mental health. I was diagnosed bipolar, manic depressive, was on medication so much from 16 years old, and really felt like I had a lot of identity around those. Was told I'd be on medication for the rest of my life. And those are not, and again, for people who choose that route, there's no judgment. We really can't judge anything.
No.
Because I know that if someone's doing something, has something, we'll say, or whatever, it's for a very, very good reason. The body doesn't just willy-nilly do this kind of stuff for no reason.
Absolutely.
People have great reason, and oftentimes it's keeping them safe. We may not understand it consciously, but I've been in so many sessions around the world to know that there is something that their mind is telling them it's safer to do this than something else.
Right. I think the hardest part, the most sensitive part around this discussion is this not something you're actually saying, but that can easily be construed that it's your fault or you're choosing to do this, and just the language behind it, which is difficult to navigate with, but also without just making it seem like it's someone's fault when it's not.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's so triggery.
Yeah.
And I know that there's going to be people that instantly get that and feel that. They may have stopped listening the minute they heard that, even if we're not saying it, which I totally understand. And I was there once too. But what we are never saying is that it's someone's fault.
Right. Exactly.
Never.
That's why I brought that up, because I'm like, it could be easy for someone to say, this is what they said, that it's my fault, right? Even though you never said that.
No.
But by just the nature of the conversation, that's an easy thing we can just respond as saying that like, oh, they must be saying that it's my fault that I'm doing this or that I am experiencing this. And that's not what you're saying.
No, but if that's you out there feeling that, what I will tell you is there's a core belief at play. This fault, blame, guilt, shame thing, it's usually learned in childhood. It's usually used as a coping mechanism to change, to do better. If I can guilt myself enough, I'll do better. Mm-hmm. Or if someone shames me enough, I won't do it. Or, something like that. And the body's like, no. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing something I can't help. Mm-hmm. And you should, this is not my fault.
Right.
So strongly the body's trying to speak that. And I would say I agree with you. It is not your fault.
Right.
No, the body is for you. Absolutely. 100% for you. And so when there's physical ailments, when there's emotional, mental ailments that are going on, it's actually your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. If you're constantly thinking about sad, depressive things, then your body's going to produce those chemicals. Right. If you're constantly thinking about a trauma or an issue or whatever, then there's going to be, even if it's subconscious, right? Mm-hmm. And if you haven't dealt with it, then it is constantly subconscious. So your body's doing what it needs to do.
Right.
But what if we could focus? What if those neural pathways in our brain could light up the ones that we want to be there or create new ones to a life that we do want? How would that affect our mental health, our physical health, right? And so it's what we focus on.
It's so what we focus on. My dad actually has like a mental health story. He was diagnosed with bipolar, manic depressive, basically my whole childhood. He had a lot of medications. He was taking one medication for it, or a couple, and he was taking something for that. Something gave him vertigo, and then he took something for the vertigo. And so he was on medications for my whole childhood. I remember like growing up witnessing experiences through his like what he was experiencing. But he has actually, with the help of his doctors, which obviously is always recommended, got off all of his medications. He hasn't done a specific mind change, but he actually wants to do, because he still wants to work on himself even more, just like we all have work we can do. Yes. But I'm amazed by when he shifted the power to himself. Yeah. Something clicked within him, and he took control of his health through his lifestyle. He went plant-based. He started not only just plant-based, but like in all of our lifestyle facets, right? It wasn't just about like that it wasn't in control anymore. He was in control now, and he got off of all of his medications in the last couple of years. I couldn't even believe it. My whole childhood, from that to this, like he seems like a totally different person. It's amazing. I'm so like just thankful for his like redeeming story, and there's so many like that, and it's really helpful, I think, to hear those stories. But let's just talk really quickly about your course. Can you tell everybody a little bit about this course that you just came out with?
Yes.
So that anybody who is looking like, okay, I'm ready, I am pumped for this. Wow, sorry for the noises, guys. It's actually dark now. If you're not watching this, there's like coqui frogs and birds, and I don't know what that car was,
and
but
motorcycles.
And motorcycles. So can you tell everybody about this course that you came out for people who are ready to like heal and grow, and they want a tool to be able to access?
Yeah. So obviously there's my wife's book, right? Mind Change.
Yes.
And that's a deep dive, and that's like, hey, I'm going to learn what I need to learn and then start to work on myself. But some people really want to go even deeper. And so that's what we do in the course, is we go into the neurobiology, the neurochemistry. Okay, how does a thought become what we do and all these other things? So it goes even deeper, but then it's a really a large portion of it is teaching you how to change your own mind, how to use the techniques, the tools, the things that we do. How do you work on yourself? And so that's the biggest thing, is we want people to, we're only two people, we work with a lot of clients, but we want people to know that the power doesn't come from us. The power comes from themselves, from within, from our own brain. And so we want people to be able to work on themselves, to heal themselves, because we all are capable of that. And I'll even add to that, Mind Change is not just for those, we've talked a lot about trauma, right? Mind Change is not just for, I had a lot of trauma, or I have a lot of issues right now. It can be, hey, I just want to level up. Like, I just want to, I feel like I'm in a really good place. Are there any hurdles, or are there any places that I want to get to that I'm not sure how to get to? Great. Those are just blocks, subconscious blocks that you can actually get rid of and then level up in your life. So that's what this course is working on yourself from whether it's physical stuff, whether it's emotional stuff, or just, hey, I want to get better and better and better as a human being and be the best me I can be.
Right.
But it's cool because there's a student community that you get to be a part of. There's, Facebook groups, private groups, community groups, a lot of different things. You can share a little bit more.
And mentoring, we do private mentoring for
That's
the
amazing.
groups because the one-on-one sessions are great and we love that, but we feel like it's limiting.
Right.
I get booked out months and months in advance.
Right. There's only so many people you can reach that way.
Yes. So that was the book, was like, let's just get it out there so that it's accessible to anybody. And then we realized people want more. So we're like, okay, so we did the course, and the course really gets deep into all of that stuff.
I
And
highly recommend the course for anyone who is interested in this stuff. It's intense work.
it is.
Sorry, keep going.
It is.
But I highly recommend it.
But it's not like hard work. It's like deep work.
It's deep work. Yes.
But I feel like we make it pretty user-friendly, pretty
awesome.
easy
That's awesome.
to do. It's not like, and then you have to do this one thing for an hour every day, and it involves you twisting into this shape, and it's not that.
Right.
It's pretty user-friendly. And then the other thing that we've done is, so we've got the course, it's out there, we really want to support people. We want to train more people to do this. So we actually have a few associate practitioners who've been trained, who also can offer sessions.
People we've been walking with, who've done multiple courses with us.
Yeah, and they help in the community, so it's really cool. And then we started a nonprofit, and it's called the Mind Change Movement. Because ideally, we want to make this stuff accessible, affordable to anyone who needs it. Like, it shouldn't be, those with big bank accounts that get the help that they need.
Right.
But we need, there's a lot of people out there who have the money and, need to give it to someone for a nonprofit sort of situation. This is what we're doing. So it's kind of brand new, but what we'd like to do is we want to do more research. We want to get the research out there to show you what's happening in your brain when you do this work, to show you why it works.
Right. Because it's just the beginning stages, really.
Yeah.
It's so really still in the beginning stages. I mean, I've used it for 8 years now, I think, or more. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients, thousands at this point probably. Now, and then Kent, we got Kent trained up, and he works with a lot of people. But the more we work, the more people that we bring in, the more we grow, the more we learn.
Yeah.
And then isn't it also providing services for people who can't afford it?
Right, and we have
Absolutely.
scholarship programs.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because we've already gotten a couple donations, and they're like, hey, I just want this to go to somebody who needs it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I want them to be able to heal people that can't maybe afford, but they still want the healing and need the healing. So
Right.
that's really neat.
And we
Wow.
have people that fly in for private retreats, but we also are going to be doing these big group retreats, which I cannot even, they're going to be so mind-blowing.
special.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's going to be, people's lives completely change. And even a client that we have that we're doing a retreat with now, she's like, I thought it would take longer. She's like, I've had one session. I feel like everything I wanted has already happened.
Wow.
She's got
That's amazing.
3 more days.
That's
So
amazing.
that happens so often. People are like, I didn't expect, I had high expectations, but I didn't know I would change this much. So
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, so many great things. The course, though, probably is where we can get the most people.
Yes, definitely check out the course. For
Yeah.
those of you listening or watching, I'll put the link in the show notes. So I have one more question for you. What are three things that people who are listening or watching today can take away from this episode? What
good.
can they do?
I mean, one thing I'll say is you can create. I mean, you can destroy the things that are going on in your mind, in your life, the trauma, but you can create whatever life that you want. You really can. I know that sounds like some kind of, thing you'd hear at some big weekend retreat kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you go home and forget all about it. But you have the power already within you if you'll just harness it.
So what do they do? What can they do in the meantime?
I'd say really read the book, because the book lays it all out there. And if you want to kick back on it, that's okay. Kick back on it. But the research is there. So I make the book really user-friendly, but the research is there. You want to dig deeper, it's all there in the recommended reading.
Yeah, if you want to go deeper, go to the course. If you want to go even deeper, do sessions. There's ways to do it, but we want people to be empowered in themselves.
That's amazing.
Yes. Listen, nobody's stuck. Nobody has to be stuck. Even if it's been happening for 50, 60 years, even if it's been generationally passed down, even if they've told you it's in your DNA, anything can be changed. And we can think differently about it and feel differently about it, and that we're worth it.
Wow.
We are so worth it.
Yeah.
Being able to enjoy our lives.
That's beautiful.
So that's what I want people to know.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much for coming on here. This was all like super impactful information. I know it's changed my life for sure, and it's helped so many people. So I really appreciate you guys coming on and explaining all this. I hope that everybody listening can gain something really, really important about this topic.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much.
much for having us.
Yay.